Alrighty, there's that. And there's that. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. For those of you who are new and just tuning in, my name is Dana. My name is Dana, and it's wonderful to have you here. I hope that you too. I hope that you guys enjoyed the two episodes last week, and I hope that it made up for my absence the prior week. But yeah, I hope that was a fun little treat for you guys, and we're back on track with the episodes. So, how are you guys doing? Did you have a good week? Did you have a good weekend? I'm recording this on Saturday and I have to work. I have to go in at 5, so it's not that bad, and it is overtime. But yeah, so I want to get this edited and up before I go into work. So that is the goal. Uh, before before I start though, I have to show you guys something. So, tell you guys who are just listening, show you guys who are on the Patreon. I went to Sacred Moon Circle Apothecary today, and they are moving house. They found a new place to set up shop that has a little bit more room, which is awesome. I'm really excited for them. I'm really excited to see it. Uh, but they're having a moving sale. Everything is on sale. And today I went and I got an obsidian scrying mirror. Yeah, I'm really excited. I first heard about it on the Witch Amateur Hour podcast, which is great. But look at that. Oh my goodness. It's so, you can see my notes and everything, but it's so beautiful. And it came with some chime candles. We've got purple and blue and orange in a little bag, which is so cool. And it also came with incense. It came with uh, frankincense incense and spiritual aura incense. That one smells so good. But yes, I'm going to be setting that up on King Hades' altar, and I'm just really excited to use it. So yeah, it's going to be great. But I just wanted to share that with you. So, what am I talking to you about today? Well, I am talking to you about Wicca and Gerald B. Gardner, who many have accredited to the start of the Wicca religion and movement. So let's just get right into it, all right? So, Wicca, as defined by the Google search engine, is a form of modern paganism, especially a tradition founded in England in the mid 20th century and claiming its origins in pre Christian religions. According to Merriam Webster, Wicca is defined as a religion influenced by pre Christian beliefs and practices of Western Europe that affirms the existence of supernatural power, such as magic, and of both male and female deities who inhere in nature and emphasize ritual observance of seasonal and life cycles. So, Wicca is based on a reverence for nature, and as such, Wiccans worship a Mother Earth and a Father Sky, that feminine and masculine energy, viewing them as personifications of the natural world itself. They are polytheists, though particular goddesses and gods can and are personally worshipped by individuals of this religion. Many meet in a coven, which is also referred to as a small group of individuals, but there are also some solitary practitioners. Covens are autonomous, unique, and diverse from each other. They can be all female, all male, or mixed gender, and can be small or large. They may be dedicated to a singular deity, to multiple deities, for one specific purpose, or just as a wide swath. They can do many things. Um, Wicca and Wiccans don't typically recognize or worship Satan or the devil or any other similar deities or entities like those. They focus mainly on positive aspects and workings and energies, stuff like that. Most Wiccans abide by what is known as the threefold return or threefold rule. And that is any positive magic or working that's directed towards an individual will return times 3 to the caster, while any negative magic or working will be returned times 3 to harm the caster. This rule is meant to help promote and encourage personal responsibility. While relatively modern in the grand scheme of things, the roots of Wicca may be traced to tribal Europe, though interest in a nature based religion rose to popularity in the 1930s. Wicca has garnered attention and interest due to 20th century authors such as Margaret Murray, Robert Graves, and perhaps most notably, Gerald Gardner. So, who exactly is Gerald Gardner? Well, he was born as Gerald Brosseau Gardner, and he was a writer, occultist, and witch who is often accredited as the founder of contemporary Wicca in England in the 1950s. He was born in Blundellsands, England on June 13th, 1884, making him a Gemini, to a moderately wealthy family. So he had some money. And excuse me for just one moment. Alrighty. As a child, Gardner was passionate about history and archaeology, and he often traveled with his Irish nursemaid all over Europe, even to the point that when he was a little older, I think around 16 or so, he moved with her when she got married to what is modern day Sri Lanka. In his 30s, he moved to Borneo and worked planting rubber trees. This eventually led him to move to Malaysia in 1923 when he was 39 years old to work on a rubber tree plantation and as a rubber tree plantation inspector. But he also did jobs as a customs official and an inspector of opium, which is a drug. So yeah, there's that. While he was living in Malaysia, Gardner delved into the local religions, customs, traditions, and supernatural and magical beliefs. He published his first work, Crease and Other Melee Weapons, during this time. He was able, when he was working, he was able to accumulate a decent amount of wealth and money and was able to retire at the age of 52. And when he retired, he moved back to England with his wife. Most of his time in retirement was spent leading archaeological expeditions across Europe and Asia Minor. During a visit to Cyprus for one of these expeditions, and Cyprus, for those who don't know, just in case, is an island in the Mediterranean. While during a visit to Cyprus, he discovered places that he had previously dreamt of, and this led Gardner to believe and be convinced that he had actually lived on the island during a previous life. This was used as the setting and background for his 1939 novel, A Goddess Arrives, which focuses on the worship of Aphrodite 2,500 years ago. Gardner became intrigued, and some would even argue obsessed, with the idea of a goddess religion that allegedly stemmed from Europe's Stone Age. And I use the word allegedly because when talking about Stone Age and prehistorical religions and cultures, unless hard archaeological evidence is found, we can only really speculate and guess. Okay. I just want to make that very clear that I wasn't being like burr, 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 and all that stuff. According to such a religion, the mother goddess was the creator and focal point of religious power. It's believed by some that this feminine religion was the primary one for centuries before being usurped thousands of years ago by the sky god or male based religions that are so prominent today. People in the early 21st century have called into question the existence of such a female based religion, but in the 1930s, people in both the United States and the United Kingdom believed in it. And alrighty, and we're back. Sorry, I had to pause. My partner needed something, which is fine, which is totally fine. Alrighty, so where was I? Okay. So Gardner studied the history of the region that he'd moved to in England and found that it had what he considered deep roots in witchcraft. This put him on the path to becoming involved with the Fellowship of Crotona. And I'm not gonna lie, when I was doing research, I was like, the Fellowship of the Rings? Like Lord of the Rings? But no, the Fellowship of Crotona. And I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, really. But this was a group, maybe still is, I didn't look too much into them, I'm not going to lie, that practice theosophy, which is a religious and philosophical system, as well as Rosicrucian rituals, and that claimed to be from a line or of a line of hereditary witches. Gardner made the assertion that a woman by the name of Old Dorothy initiated him into her coven in 1939. Once he'd been made a member, he began studying witchcraft in earnest, really delving deep into as much as he could and learning what he could. He was very invested in it, and he, from an early age, was very much about the history of places and things and stuff like that, which totally relate. Love history myself. But this, one of the reasons why he delved so deep is because he intended to write a book. But due to there being laws against witchcraft in England during that time period, he published his 1949 novel, High Magic's Aid, under the false name of Scire, which is spelled Scire. I forgot to look that up to see how it's pronounced, but made sure to pronounce Crease, the melee weapon. So, yeah. Gardner did come to eventually meet Aleister Crowley. And I plan on doing an episode strictly on Aleister Crowley in the future, but just know that he is a person, was a person, who is interesting, to say the least. But Gardner met with Crowley prior to Crowley's death and managed to persuade him to write down the practices of his former coven. It was during this time that Crowley initiated Gardner into the Ordo Templi Orientis, and that put Gardner on the path to eventually open his own Ordo Templi Orientis lodge. This lodge that he opened was mostly made of men, and female membership was actually so low that prostitutes were hired to perform what Gardner called the Great Rite. This is a ritual that, during that time, involved or involves a high priestess having sex with male members. And that is hella sus to me. I'm not going to lie. Not like, listen, if you incorporate sex and sex magic into rituals and practices, totally fine. What is hella sus is that this lodge that is mostly men, that this was done, if you get what I'm getting at. And I didn't look into the Ordo Templi Orientis because I wanted to focus on Gardner's life and Wicca, but it seemed a little, I don't know, a little suspect to me is all. But that's just me. And maybe I need to delve further deep into research and stuff. But that was just a little, I didn't really like that personally. Anyway, back on track. By 1951, the laws against witchcraft in England were repealed or dissolved, and that allowed Gardner to openly speak about his practice and to form a coven of his very own. He relocated to the Isle of Man and eventually bought the Museum of Magic and Witchcraft there, even going so far as to personally run it himself. His book, Witchcraft Today, was published in 1951, and that helped to spark renewed interest in the craft, leading to a plethora of new covens forming. Gardner was dubbed Britain's chief witch by the media. Not everyone, though, was appreciative or accepting of Gardner's books and how outspoken he was about his practice and other things. Some witches were angry at him, actually, for sharing too much of what they felt were secrets of the practice with outsiders, as well as for incorporating nudism with witchcraft practices and beliefs. Gardner claimed at some point during this time that his grandfather had actually married a witch, and that others in his family had supernatural or psychic abilities. Also, that he had familial ties to a woman named Gerald Gardner, who was burned in 1610 for being a witch. It was often said that Gardner was a difficult man to work with, mainly due to his arrogant and controlling nature. This did contribute to many of his followers butting heads with him and even splitting themselves away from him. Another book of his was published in 1959 titled The Meaning of Witchcraft. In 1960, he was invited to Buckingham Palace due to his service in the Far East. This is also the year that his wife passed away. All of his life, Gardner had asthma and poor health. And this actually contributed to why he moved with his Irish nursemaid to Sri Lanka to begin with. It was also because of this and because of his health issues that he decided to take a trip to Lebanon. On the return ship from Lebanon, Gardner had a heart attack, and that led to him dying on February 12th, 1964, at the age of 80. He was buried in Tunis, Tunisia, in Africa, and it's alleged that the only mourner at his funeral was the ship's captain. And I didn't look further into that because I kind of did not have the time, I will not lie, but if that is true, that is pretty bad. Pretty bad. The Museum of Magic and Witchcraft was left to the high priest of his coven at the time and her husband. They did run it for a time before they sold it to, get this, the Ripley's Believe It or Not company. Following his death, Gerald B. Gardner's papers were made public, and it was soon revealed that his claims of being initiated into witchcraft via a long traditional ritual ceremony were false. He had combined aspects from Crowley, from Asian folklore and ritual customs, as well as from medieval writings, texts, and other mystical orders to create his own rituals. The ritual knife that he had used, which was called, and you might recognize this, the athame, was actually based off of the Malaysian kris. Gardner had selected 8 ancient pagan festivals and reworked or repurposed them into what we now know today as the witch Sabbats or witchcraft holy days. In addition, he made espits or meetings or gatherings that aligned with the lunar cycle, kind of a weekly occurrence or more common. It is important to note that Gardner never traveled to the United States, even though he is credited with bringing Wicca and witchcraft here. Prior to his death, it's said that he initiated an author by the name of Raymond Buckland into the practice in 1963, while Buckland was visiting England from the USA. Now, for those of you who don't know, Buckland is an English author who has written a few books on witchcraft and the practice, but I'm not going to delve too much into him today because I want to focus on this. But know that I will be talking about him in the future. I promise you. Upon returning to the USA, Buckland introduced what was termed Gardnerian traditional Wicca to the masses in 1964. But I did also see, just to put in a little note, that it was actually the high priestess of Gardner's coven who initiated Buckland and not Gardner himself. But that's just a little note I want to add. All right, where is my mouse? Found it. Sorry, I've got to scroll down for my notes because I actually typed these today. I mean, I did handwrite them, but I typed them as well, just to make this whole recording video thing easier for me and more appealing to you guys. So I hope that that's working. Now, let's talk about the Gardnerian traditional Wicca. Let's talk about that. Gardner's Book of Shadows was never made publicly available or published, but it is said that each coven had or has its own copy of it. While Gardner's basic teachings and rituals are included in those copies, they differ from each coven depending on local customs and preferences. There are secrets and mysteries that are passed on through different tiers, degrees, or levels. Once someone has made it to the 3rd degree, they are considered to have complete knowledge of this tradition and may, if they so desire, choose to leave the coven to start their own. So a few additional points that I'd like to make. Hold on. All right. So according to the Gardnerian tradition, 13 is the ideal number of members for a coven, though that may also vary. There are initiation rites that new members have to go through, and this is to ascertain or confirm that students who want to join are serious about learning and expanding their knowledge. Gardner did develop rituals for each Sabin espit, as well as for each degree of initiation into his tradition of Wicca. As someone who believed in naturism, he typically wrote for rituals and ceremonies to be done in the nude by at least a high priestess. There is still much debate on what Gardner created himself and what he actually pulled from historical tradition. It is considered one of the oldest forms of Wicca and is acknowledged by many as the beginning of the Wicca movement. Now, with that being said, with everything that I've told you about Gerald B. Gardner, it is very important to note that Gardner did not invent Wicca, okay? He renewed interest in it and developed his own set of practices, beliefs, and rituals. Wicca was and is considered a piece of the contemporary pagan movement, much like Druidry, heathenry, and witchcraft. All of these paths and practices have roots in numerous pre-Christian traditions, cultures, and religions. As such, no one person can claim to truly be the inventor of any of the above mentioned practices. And I feel like that's very important to note because we don't, due to these practices and the like, stemming from older traditions and stuff like that, I feel like it's important that credit is given where credit is due. And we should acknowledge the history of where these come from. For me personally, I believe that that is important because one should, again, this is my personal opinion, one should understand and acknowledge and give gratitude to the past, because the past is the foundation for a lot of things. I hope that makes sense. I hope that my train of thought makes sense. Now, not all witches consider themselves to be Wiccan or part of the Wiccan religion, and vice versa. Not all Wiccans consider themselves to be witches. Wicca focuses a lot on a god, on a goddess and god, and puts a lot of importance on ritual and direct spiritual experiences instead of straight belief, like perhaps Christianity does. Wiccans can also practice alone in solitary practices, as I've stated before, or they can be in a coven if they choose. This solitary practice actually allows for more personal freedom to formulate a practice that is unique to the individual. Wicca is heavily involved with nature and the environment, of course, and divinity is actually seen in nature. And as such, Wicca seeks to respect and harmonize with nature. Circles are often cast for rituals and ceremonies or to help create a sacred space. Most Wiccans, but not all, view Samhain as the start of the new year. The pentacle is considered the symbol of Wicca, and the Wiccan Rede is as follows: "And it harm none, do what ye will. And it harm none, do what ye will." Under the First Amendment in the United States, Wicca is a recognized and protected religion. Now, to wrap things up, I would like to explain some differences between Wicca and witchcraft, because I have seen them used interchangeably. And while they do share a lot of common similarities and traditions and practices and the like, they're not, in fact, the same. And they're not. But maybe you're a little confused or you don't understand inherently the difference. Well, hold tight because I'm about to help you with that. Okay, so first and foremost, Wicca is a religion, while witchcraft is a practice itself. Wicca typically utilizes the energy of the earth and the universe. Witchcraft can do this, but also one's personal energy is also used as well. So it's not just from the earth. Witchcraft also incorporates the witch's personal influence and touch into whatever working or ritual that they are doing. Wicca has rules, guidelines, in a sense, whereas in witchcraft, a witch can choose their own disciplines. And the reason why I'm kind of like about rules and guidelines is for the, I know for the Gardnerian tradition, there are a set things to do. And as someone who first delved into the pagan witchcraft world through Wicca, yeah, there are some things that are like steps or guidelines. But again, it's not just the Gardnerian Wicca. Each coven and each solitary practice is unique and different. So while there are and can be a set of boxes to check off, it's not as concrete as one would think. But that's anyway. Wiccans work with a goddess and god, while witchcraft in and of itself is inherently secular. It's not religious and does not require someone to work with deities, entities, or anything like that. Okay? Wicca was established in the 20th century, while witchcraft is universal. It's ancient and has appeared throughout history. There have been ancient archaeological discoveries of magic and things that, while maybe in the past were not called witchcraft, were in hindsight with our 21st century eyes witchcraft. All right, I hope that makes sense. Wicca tends to focus mostly on positive workings and energy. Again, it has that threefold rule, whereas witchcraft can be strictly positive, it can be negative if you want, it can be gray, it can be self-serving, it can be anything that the practitioner wants it to be. Okay? Witchcraft is a practice of magic and spell work, among other things. But for Wicca, it's not mandatory to do spell work in a sense. It's not mandatory to learn about herbs or incorporate them into your practice, if that makes sense. And I think one of the big things that differentiates the two is Wicca is a recognized and protected religion in the United States, whereas witchcraft is not. And by is not, I mean it's not a religion that's like that. It's just a practice. Okay? So, yeah, that's what I have for you. Now, there are some aspects that I did not touch on inherently, such as circle casting. And that's because I'm going to talk about that in its own video. All right. So for those who are like, but you missed this, that, and the other thing, it will be covered in a future video. I promise. All right. But yeah, let me know. Please do let me know either via comment or message or email if you delved into Wicca or started out like I did, learning about Wicca and paganism through that avenue. For the longest time, I personally did consider myself Wiccan, but I've kind of separated myself from that because one, in my area, I didn't really know anyone during that time when I was learning about it that could properly guide me or initiate me into the practice. And yeah, that, and I don't want to confine myself or be strictly in that box. I want to do my own thing and have my own practice. So that's why whenever someone asks now, it's like, I'm a witch. I practice witchcraft instead of I'm a Wiccan and I do witchcraft. Stuff like that. I hope that makes sense. And I hope that that made sense to you guys. I hope that that shed a little light on the differences between Wicca and witchcraft, and I hope that you learned something. Please, though, let me know what your opinions on Wicca and witchcraft and evil, and even Gerald Gardner are. Do you, I don't know, like him? Do you think he's a butt? Like I said, that high priestess prostitutes having sex with members just was a little suspect to me, is all I'm going to say. But yeah, I would like to thank you for listening or for taking time out of the day to watch this if you're a patron. I do record these videos, the recording sessions, and I post them, on Patreon, and they are available for paid members. So if you like to watch videos or watch a podcast, sometimes I like to watch my podcast instead of strictly listen, then you may do so. And I would like to thank you, though, if all you do is just listening. I greatly appreciate for every listen and for taking the time out of your day to listen to me. Ooh, that reminds me, something exciting that happened this past Tuesday. We reached 1,000 plays. Yeah. When I logged into Spotify for podcasters, it said 1,000 plays, and I was so excited. And I could not have gotten there without you guys. So thank you very much. It means a lot to me, and it really does. More so than you know. But I hope that you all have a marvelously magical Monday. Take care of yourselves. Be sure to drink some water and be kind to yourself. Be gentle to yourself. You need it. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye. Bye, guys. Goodbye. Goodbye now. Goodbye now. Goodbye. Bye now. Aladdin. You get it? Okay, we're going to give this a try and see if this works.